at the International Forum for Women in E-Learning, or IFWE. That's a biannual conference that's sponsored by our friends over at USDLA. In 2014, I met Sharon there, and I didn't realize then that these conversations would lead to other things. We had a great conversation at the conference over lunch, and I attended her pre-conference workshop, A Feeling of Balance. And after the event, we stayed in touch, which led her institution to sponsoring the QM East Regional Conference in New York City for 3 years in a row. It was an amazing opportunity for QM to provide this East Regional Conference in New York City, and Sharon and her team were nothing short of amazing to work with. We are grateful for the journey we've traveled together, and thinking about how we could support each other during these crazy times, a feeling of balance came to mind, and we knew just the person to share this message with our community. As a working professional and mother of 3 grown children, Sharon has been juggling career, parenting, family, and a busy schedule for 25 years or more. And when her youngest was approaching college, she recognized that personal time would become an ally and began making intentional choices about how her time would be spent. Sharon's passion for self-discovery and exploration has provided her with a deeper understanding of what balance is, what it looks like, and most importantly, what it feels like. Through keynotes, workshops, and trainings, she guides participants on their own personal journeys to achieving a more balanced, centered life. Through her company, SFG Consulting, she guides participants on their own personal journeys as a resume writer, a career and leadership coach, and by delivering workshops, keynotes, and training on achieving a more balanced, centered life. Please join me in welcoming, with your clapping reaction, Sharon Goldstein, our keynote speaker.
Sharon, you're still muted.
Thank you very much, Brenda. And I had a big smile on my face as you were doing that introduction, because I remember very well all those years back. And I'm a big butterfly effect proponent, and it truly is amazing where roads lead. So let me share my screen here and let's get going. Okay. Are you seeing my screen?
We are.
Yes,
it's not yet in presentation mode, but we see your PowerPoint.
Okay.
Perfect.
Okay. You can see that. Okay, awesome. So again, thank you. I'm really so glad to be here and continue to be part of the QM journey. And speaking about one of my favorite topics, and it's truly my hope that today that I can present a different perspective on a topic we hear so much about. And it's just been such a tough time with COVID. Our lives have been turned upside down and inside out. Everything has changed. The fact that we're having this conference virtually is a departure from being in New York City altogether. And certainly those of you who've been working from home, which is most of us, and even homeschooling and having kids at home and school at home, our lives really have been turned upside down and inside out. And the lines between work and life and balance really have been blurred. I mean, it was always a difficult thing, and it's even more difficult these days. So I'm hoping today that we will discuss some concepts around the idea of balance, what it looks like, some strategies, and see how they come together to potentially yield the outcomes that we are looking for. Now, let's talk for a minute about QM, okay? About the QM mission, right? Isn't it about outcomes, right? You're looking for the best possible outcomes for courses and students, right? So you want to make the course the best it can possibly be to yield the best outcomes for the students that we serve. And that doesn't just happen. The fact that you're here and putting the time in is a testament to it not just happening. So it's careful preparation It's learning. And think of how much time you spend on developing your skills to be better at what you're doing. And you're committing to the QM rubric and to the QM way of doing things. So I'm going to ask you to keep that mindset today when we're speaking about balance and getting a feeling of balance, because that too doesn't just happen. It's an outcome. And it's the result of mindset, it's the result of values alignment, of choices, and absolutely of preparation. So who knows, maybe at the end of today, QM might even grant you the APP feeling of balance rubric designation when we're through. Who knows, you'll put the time in, maybe you'll get the certification. We'll see. So as Brenda spoke about in the introduction, I had a real aha moment many, many years ago. My two older kids were away at college, and my youngest son was not yet driving. And it was a Friday evening, and he had asked me to take him to a friend's house. And I did. And on the way home, I actually remembered a light bulb going off in my head, thinking, wow, time. Nobody needs me tonight. And it was a different kind of feeling. I have three kids, and I was always on the run. And I thought to myself, you know what? Time is going to look very different for me. And I can continue throwing myself into my work or not. And I actually went home that night and applied for a master's program. I had wanted to pursue my master's degree, and I was unable to do it just from a time perspective. And I thought, you know what? I can do that now. And I wanted to travel, and I wanted to learn how to play golf. And there's all these things that I wanted to do. And I wasn't quite sure where I was going to fit any of this stuff in. But I realized that time was going to become an ally, and not just because I was less needed, but because this was more on my mind. And I realized that I have 24 hours in the day, and I'm really the person who can decide how to use that time. So that's when I really started thinking about balance and my work and what I could do to yield better outcomes. And so the idea of, can you learn to balance? If we believe that balance is an outcome, then we need to employ the behaviors that will yield to that outcome. We need to learn to align our values, understand what is important to us and the things that we value. And we also need to identify within ourselves what gives us that calm, easy, peaceful feeling. The peaceful feeling, the calmness, the contentment, that's the result of feeling that balance. And we want to remove the fear. Okay, there's a lot of fear in this process, the fear of missing out and the guilt that comes when we take the time for ourselves. And we're going to talk about some strategies for doing this shortly. But whether it's the ability to leave our phones behind or leave our work behind, physically or otherwise, we need to prepare ourselves so that when we step away, it is without guilt, and we allow ourselves the ability to recharge, because that's what it's really all about. Isn't that the outcome that you seek? You want to be able to recharge that battery, feel energized, feel contentment, and then ready to take on the next step. And again, just as APPQMR is learning and learning how to apply information to get an outcome, so too is learning how to balance by careful preparation. And we also need very much to believe. Okay, we need to believe that it's possible, but more importantly, we need to believe that we're worth it. And that's really at the core of this. We need to believe that our well-being is something that is very important and something for which we need to pay attention. To get off of email, to take a vacation, right? It sounds great, but we really struggle with that. And there was a story I want to share with you that happened to me many, many, many years ago, early in my balance work. And I was with a group of people in our one of our New Jersey campuses, and we needed to go to a location in Brooklyn. And so we got a van. There were about 15 of us. And it was early morning, and it was a beautiful, beautiful spring day. And we all get on this van. And what's the first thing that everybody does? We took out, well, there were Blackberries at that time. So we took out our Blackberries, and we were all very busy on our Blackberries. And there was a senior leader on the bus, a very, very senior leader. And I turned around and I looked at him, and he was sitting there looking out the window. No Blackberry in sight. And I looked around the rest of the van, and everybody was on their Blackberries except for him. And I thought to myself, I wonder what he's thinking about us and our ability to use our time wisely. I put my Blackberry away and I thought to myself, this man has to be busier than I am. And yet he's enjoying the ride. I am going to do that as well. And I did. And it was a beautiful spring day. And there were lots of things to see. But more importantly, it was a restful ride in. And that really was a wake up call for me. And it also speaks to a management style. I had a boss at the time who was deciding on a vacation, and they loved cruising. So they either wanted to go to this cruise or that cruise and couldn't make a decision. So they decided to do both. They went 1 week on one cruise, the second week on another cruise. And at the time, the Wi-Fi on cruise ships was awful. And I said to her, how do you do that? And she said, I do it. There's no Wi-Fi and I'm away. And she said, I trust the people that work for me. And I was one of those people, and it was empowering for me to hear. And this started my sort of awakening to the topic, because I thought watching these senior leaders be able to define their boundaries, there had to be something in it. There had to be something in it. And I kind of think of it too, like going to the gym, right? You know, we go when it's not COVID, we go to the gym and we work out. I certainly do. And I'm going to admit, I don't love it. And I wonder, I can't really see a show of hands right now, but how many people actually love going to the gym? Some of you do, and I really applaud that. I'm not one of them, but I go. Why? Because of the outcome. Because I know that if I do this and if I exercise regularly, it will be good for my health. It's an outcome. It's a preparation for an outcome. And so that's what I do. And we've got to keep that. We've definitely got to keep that in mind. And you need to build the mindset again that you are worth it. That if there's a more relaxed and a more rested and refreshed version of you, then you are going to be able to provide everyone around you with your very best. Your employer, your colleagues, your family, your friends. Think about the example when you fly, which I'm sure, well, some of us have started to fly now, but you know, on the airplane, you put your oxygen mask on first before you're helping somebody else. And you've really got to think about that and believe that you are worth it. So when I do my workshop, I dig deep. We do lots and lots of exercises where everybody has the ability to dig deep. Today, I'm just going to touch on very lightly on some of these topics, just to give you a little bit of flavor of the types of things that you can do to prepare to feel more balanced. So my slide is about raindrops on roses from the Sound of Music, and a few of my favorite things. So I want you to think about some of the things that are favorites for you. Your favorite book to read, your favorite hobby. Think about, again, when we're going out, maybe a favorite restaurant or a favorite place to vacation, a favorite volunteer activity, your favorite concert, your favorite artist to hear live. Oh, I can't wait till we could do all this stuff again. Your favorite subject to learn about. So you think about your favorite people to hang out with. Okay, and think about when was the last time, again, barring COVID, but when was the last time you did these things, right? More importantly, when is the next time you're planning to do these things? And again, barring COVID, I'm attempting to bring your attention to whether or not you are paying attention to the things that you prefer, the things that you value, the things that you enjoy. And if it's been a while, what are you waiting for? Okay, these are the things that are important to you. We need to incorporate them more into our life. And so it's about also understanding what energizes you. And many, I would suspect, have taken a Myers-Briggs test. The very first time I did it was about probably 8 or 9 years ago. And I came out as a heavy introvert. And I said to the facilitator, no way, this is not right. And they said, just, hear the whole explanation out. And I'm like, no way, this is not me. Well, when I learned about what these headings were all about, I realized it very much was me. And it's not whether or not you're comfortable getting up and speaking in front of people or you're being outgoing. It's about where you get your energy source and how you recharge. And so for me, I would rather be home reading a book or being with one other person or being on a quiet lake or looking at the ocean rather than being the life of the party or the center of attention where I get my energy. So in fact, an introvert was correct. I happened to take that test again about 7, 8 years later, and it came up exactly the same way. And this time I really kind of agreed with it. So when we look at some of the definitions here of balance, um, I want to draw your attention actually to the last one, a state in which different things occur in equal or proper amounts or have an equal or proper amount of importance. That's the, that's the piece that's very interesting here. I believe it does not have to be a 50-50, but rather you need to allow some time for the things that are important to you. Balance, again, it's not a thing you do. You don't just shut off the phone and expect to feel balance. In fact, quite the opposite, right? If I asked everyone right now to shut off your phones, you'd likely feel panic. Certainly not a calm, peaceful, easy feeling, right? So the feeling of balance, the feeling of peacefulness, of calm, again, the outcome will be a manifestation of choices that you make and the beliefs that you hold. So recharging your battery and doing the things that fill your energy source are the things that are going to bring you calm. Those are the things that are soul fulfilling. And that is different for everyone. And only you know what works for you. Only you know. And there is no one size fits all when it comes to balance. So this is a survey from Glassdoor. This was done some years ago about the time that people take off from work or not, and people who are working on vacation, and some of the reasons why. Some of the reasons why people don't want to step away. And it's a lot of fear. And it's fear that someone's going to get ahead of you. It's fear that you're going to not be perceived well. It's all kinds of fear. And think of yourself when you do step away. How many of you continue to check email? How many of you leave vacation days on the table? And especially in COVID, I remember in the beginning of lockdown, people talked about vacation time. And this is silly because we're home anyway. But as time went on, I think people really started to understand that vacation time, even though we were locked in our houses, was important because what it meant was that our brains could disconnect from our work and we could focus on things that we chose to focus on. And that, in fact, became everybody's vacation because we couldn't really go anywhere or leave our house or anything. So we're going to talk a little bit about preparation and planning and the ability to be able to do this. But first, I would like to consider the distinction between valuable and indispensable. So valuable, right? We think we're bringing value to our companies, we're bringing value to our families because what we do is important versus indispensable. I think there are lots of times where we think that we are indispensable, right? Where nobody can replace us. But think about it. We all know we all can be replaced. We know that we can do our jobs. We know we do them well. at whatever it is we're doing, whether we're being paid for it or otherwise. But are we really indispensable? I'm not sure anybody really is. And so if we believe that we do bring value to the work we're doing, that isn't going to change if we step away for a day, if we step away for a week, or we step away for 3 hours. The value that we bring is still the value that we bring. So I want to ask a question on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being the weakest, with 1 being the weakest and 10 being the strongest. What do you think is your level of competence in your current role? Think of the ways that you provide value to your job, to your clients, to your students. Okay? On a scale of 1 to 10. So there may be a lot of 10s in the room, but in fact, if there aren't 10s, think about what you might need to do to learn or to develop in order to get yourself to a 10. And the fact that you're all here today likely means that you're investing in yourselves to become more of a 10. But think about what you could do to make yourself more valuable to your company, to your school, to your students, to your family. And I wonder how many of you would answer by working more hours. Likely your value comes from your knowledge and your expertise, not from the hours that you're working. Okay. So there was a woman that I worked with many years ago, and I'm sure that you'll be able to identify this person in any of your work environments as well. She was a wonderfully warm human being, and she worked longer hours than anybody that I knew. She was in first thing in the morning, and she was in at the end of the night. In fact, our cleaning people used to have to kick her out of the office. And she was just always working, always, 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 always. And what people didn't know was that she couldn't land the plane. And she was very busy working, but she wasn't getting things accomplished. And ultimately, she was put on a performance plan and she was let go. And when that happened, a huge ripple went through the organization because people felt that if she could be let go and she was one of the hardest workers, then all bets were off for everyone else. But what they didn't realize is that the value that she was bringing was less than required for the position. So it really is about value and not hours. So we talk about creating a personal culture of balance. This is where you need to define your boundaries, in addition to empowering those around you to help be supportive of your mission. This is not going to happen overnight, but with conscious effort, it absolutely will. So one of the mind shifts that we need to address here is really a very simple one. We just need to change focus just a tad and maybe bring things into a little bit better perspective, a little bit different angle. So when people choose to not take time off, okay, it's because they are focused on what they are missing, right? What are we missing? The meeting, we're missing a call, we're missing information, we're missing the office gossip, we're missing all kinds of things, right? But I propose that you expand the focus and look at the whole picture. Focus on what you would miss if you didn't take the time away. So in this picture here, I actually took it and it was a weekday and I had taken time off, and I remember questioning whether I should or shouldn't take the day off. So I was in this kayak on this lake very early in the morning. It was about 6:30 in the morning. And for those of you who are early morning people, you will understand this. I could hear the birds chirping. I could smell the air. I was on a lake in Massachusetts. There was wind rustling in the leaves. It was so incredibly peaceful. I could hear the oar hitting the water and just gliding through. And it was so incredibly peaceful. And again, as an introvert, this is the type of thing that does recharge my battery. And I thought to myself in that moment, wow, I would have missed this if I hadn't taken today off. And look what this has given me. It just filled me up. The battery was at 100%. And at that point, I thought, wow, that was an interesting perspective. What you gain by stepping away, it doesn't have to be a kayak, it doesn't have to be on a lake, it doesn't have to be anything other than what creates a sense of peacefulness for you. Taking time off, if you're not doing something that you really enjoy, is not going to create a peaceful feeling. I mean, think about again the olden days pre-COVID, on a weekend of running errands, and you run yourself ragged. You've had the 2 days off, but they didn't feel like days off because you weren't doing anything to recharge yourself. So if what we're seeking is a feeling, we do need to seek out the activities that we enjoy that provide that. And I love this quote from Alan Arkin. I think it's genius, and it definitely, the first time I heard it, it truly made me think. So I'm sharing that with you. So this is another exercise I do in my workshop, and we go really deep, but I'm going to skim over this just to give you some idea of the mindset here. I want you to think about the worst that could happen, Johnny Maestro and the Brooklyn Bridge, right? For those of you who know that song. So think about realistically what might happen in your absence. What would be the worst thing that could happen in your absence? Okay. And again, different for everybody. But if you stepped away from work, you know, what could go wrong? What would be really bad that could go wrong? Okay, let's assume that thing went wrong. Let's assume whatever that is that you just identified, let's assume that happened. What would be the worst thing that could happen if that happened? Okay. All right. And go one more step. If all that happened, what is the worst that could happen if that whole disaster scenario happened? What is the worst that could happen? Okay, so now that you've identified this, and I'm sorry to go quickly with this because this is something that's really fun to dig into when we're doing the workshop. But if you knew that on Monday, when you take the day off, that scenario is going to happen, what preventative measures could you put in place right now to address that? And would that make you feel otherwise? So if you think about the worst that could happen in your absence, perhaps think about addressing it so that if in fact it does, you've got some preparation behind it. And so I was recently speaking with someone who worked at a very small company, and she was taking 3 days off and was absolutely panicked about it. And I asked her, what's the worst that could happen in your absence? And she said, well, our server could go down and this could happen and that could happen. And I said, well, all right, let's assume that you go away and let's assume that does happen. And she turned all colors of green and red at that point. I said, what could you do right now before you go to prepare for that? And this sense of calm came over her. And I said, why don't you identify people? Why don't you create a scenario that could address that? And this relief kind of came over her. And so to continue this train of thought, those of you who may remember, this is going back a while, American Express used to have the don't leave home without it. But think about the things that you do as backups that you wouldn't leave home without, right? How many times do you hit the save button when you're working on an Excel spreadsheet? Do you fill out emergency contact cards, right? Who to call in the case of an emergency? How about a backup generator? I know I got one after Hurricane Sandy. What about a backup. I admit I have a backup blow dryer in my house, because what if my blow dryer goes and I'm in the middle of doing my hair? How many backup batteries do we have for our phones, right? Jumper cables in our car. COVID. Let's talk about toilet paper, right? The minute we thought we might not have toilet paper, the stockpiles of toilet paper that people have in their house, right? To be prepared in the event that we can't get toilet paper. Food. Did we all back up on food? We couldn't get extra freezers. I know they were sold out in our area. I had friends who wanted freezers so they could stockpile that with food. I think we get the point, right? But where are our personal backups? We are so valuable, right? We all know we're doing our jobs well, and yet we can't seem to step away and recharge, right? So perhaps we need to focus on building a backup network of our own, not to replace us, not to replace us at all, but to be there to back us up so that we can step away. So again, getting to know you, this is from The King and I. And so think for a moment of people or positions, not necessarily the individual personalities, but the positions that you might be able to count on in the event that you stepped away. Not necessarily who you depend on now, but again, think bigger picture. Who is it that you might rely on? And what could you do, say, on a weekly or a monthly basis to keep these people current on the things for which you might depend on, that you fear would cause your demise if you stepped away? So there was an example many years ago. I was in Boston at Fenway Park, and I apologize to the Yankee fans out there, but I was in Boston at Fenway with my kids enjoying a Red Sox game. And I got a phone call from someone who was very upset that their windshield had been cracked and someone broke into their car in our parking lot. We were not in the best area. And I realized what I did wrong before I left. And I had said to them, you know, they needed to contact security and they needed to walk through a series of steps. But it occurred to me that I hadn't put anyone else officially in charge, and that there were things that they could have known, or the people that stepped in could have known, that we really never reviewed. And nobody could have anticipated that if in the event somebody cracks a windshield and breaks into your car, this is what you need to do. But it got me thinking about things I need to do so that I could step away, because I really didn't want to be on the phone dealing with this situation when I was with my family and wanted to give them the time that they needed. And so we did work through that, but it was a real eye-opening experience for me the next time that I went away. So I apologize that this slide is not clear, and I couldn't find a clearer one, but boy, I think this sums it all up. You know, who's going to change the paper and the ink cartridge in the printer? And this is exactly the point that I'm looking for. If you know that this is your big worry, who can you teach? Who can you show how to do that? Maybe you show 5 people how to do that. And it's not always practical to teach everybody everything you know. But in general, what I'm trying to do is point out here that there are ways we can let people in a little bit, to think a little bit ahead of the things that we fear most when we step away, and to better prepare for it. And I think a good example of that is a simple out of office message, because this sums up a lot of what we're talking about. So in a typical out of office message, you identify your backup person, you say when you're going to be back, and you let them know what the expectation should be. Sometimes people say they will respond, they won't respond, they're checking email, they're not checking email. But it is really about managing expectations. And this is something, when you're building your personal culture of balance, that you do need to begin to think about. So I have 2 examples I'd like to share. Again, I was with my family on vacation. We were in Florida, and we were actually sitting by the pool. And I got a text message from someone that I worked with and we were in the process of planning a program where we had 5 speakers. And one of the speakers evidently was considering pulling out because she had a conflict. So this text was frantic. Oh my goodness, we're not going to have her, blah, blah. And I thought, all right, I'm here, I'm at the pool, I'm with my family. I could either go back to my room and spend the day on the computer, or I can let her handle it. And so I wrote back to her and I said, as you know, I'm away. I put my full faith and trust in you. Whatever will be, will be. We'll deal with this. And wasn't easy, but I thought from my perspective, it was the right thing for me to do. So I did that. Well, not 10 minutes later, I checked email because I was still not able to cut away as easily as I am now. And this was still sort of a new concept. And I got an email from the chairman of the board, and he was asking me a budget question. And I thought, oh no. And I decided that I was not going to respond to that because my out of office message said that I wasn't around, that I wasn't really going to have a lot of access to email, that any questions should be directed to, and I put a person down there, and when they could expect that I would be back. I knew that the answer would be easy for him to get from somebody else, so I chose not to respond. I admit that when I got home, the very first email that I addressed was that email. And I reached out and I asked if he had gotten the information that he was looking for. And he wrote back the friendliest email saying, yeah, it was not a problem at all. He found the information, but more importantly, how was my vacation? And at that moment, I just got the biggest grin on my face because I thought, wow, it worked. It worked. And I was able to spend the time and focus, and he was able to get what he needed, and nobody was angry or upset. And the third instance, when I really knew the culture had been created, was I was away at a conference, and something had gone down at work, and it was kind of a big deal. And when I got back, a very senior person said to me, "Oh, did you see that email about such and so?" And before I could respond, he said, "No, no, 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 no. You probably didn't. You were away." And boy, if ever I knew that I had created my own personal culture, that was it. And I didn't miss anything. Well, I did, but I got caught up. But more importantly, I was respected for that. And it really turned out to be okay. So managing expectations is just really what it's all about. And I want to talk to a little bit about focus and back to mind shift. If we really do want to achieve this peaceful feeling, we really have to focus. And I know there's so much in the media these days about multitasking and how not good it is for you. And I remember at the time having a very busy role, and my office was right in the middle of everything. And I would be sitting and speaking to someone in front of me, and my phone would ring, and someone would walk by the door, quick question, quick question. And I was constantly interrupted. And I thought I was being so incredibly efficient, multitasking and solving all these problems. What I didn't realize was how rude it was actually to not be giving attention to the people that were seeking it out. Um, I went to a concert. There's a musician, those of you who know me know I love Dave Koz. He's a contemporary jazz saxophone player. And my oldest son, who's in radio, had the opportunity to meet him. And we now, long story short, we get to meet him. We go backstage when we see him and we chat with him and we love him, and he's gotten to know our family, and it's all great and good. And the first time we went back, we were among maybe 30 people backstage, and he came out and he was speaking to each cluster of people. And I'm looking at him and I'm trying to catch his eye to say hello, and he never broke gaze. He was dealing entirely with the people in front of him, and I watched him work the room, and I was absolutely fascinated at his ability to focus on the people he was with. And I thought to myself, good for him, because when he's with us, even if it's for 5 minutes, we're going to get that kind of individualized, undivided attention. And I thought, man, if he could do that, I need to learn how to do that. And so when I went back to work, I really started employing that again, where I wasn't picking up a ringing phone. And if somebody came by my office when someone else was sitting there, I might just simply say, I'm with somebody, and just kind of leave it at that. And very quickly, people would walk by my office, see me with someone, and they wouldn't even interrupt because they knew that my attention was on them. And I started to see relationships almost deepening, and it really became very effective. And I encourage you to do that. And it the draw to multitask is so strong, and I understand that. But when we can focus and complete things and do it with a sense of wholeness, and knowing that that relationship is really important, and the people are important, and we're giving our full attention, that goes a long way to the ability to step away, because nobody's questioning your loyalty on that. So once again, I'm going to suggest that you do treat your work-life balance as something really, really important, that it just becomes part of how you do conduct your life. And when we focus and we manage our expectations and we build a network of people around us and we empower them and we teach them and we include them and we prepare for things that might happen when we step away, and when we believe that we are worth it and we allow ourselves to recharge by doing what we value and with whom we value, we are creating our own culture of balance. It's not going to happen overnight, but it really will. You are worth it. Believe in the outcome of a feeling of balance. Prepare for it, involve others, manage expectations, focus, enjoy. Draw that line in the sand and create a personal culture of balance. I wish you all lots of balance, lots of good feeling. Take a big deep breath and enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you.
Brenda, you're muted.
Thank you. So the conference can officially start because 2 people have now been told they're muted. So we thank you so much, Sharon. This was very timely, and I saw some fantastic comments in the chat, reminders that they really needed to hear this today. So thank you for a wonderful opening keynote, and we will begin our sessions in just a few minutes. So please go to your portal pages. And oh wait, do we have any questions? There were no questions in the Q&A. So I don't think, I think we have just a few minutes before we get started with our first sessions, but everyone really enjoyed it. So thank you, Sharon. And please, everyone, use your portal to find your session and get ready for a full day of wonderful sharing. So again, thank you so much, Sharon.
Thank you.